Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our first CavanKerry Press reading of 2022. I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy, whether you're watching us live, either on Zoom or Facebook, and that you're happy and healthy when you watch this afterwards, when this is recorded and saved onto our YouTube channel. We have a wonderful, wonderful reading tonight with two CavanKerry Press poets who know each other from other walks of life as well. And that's always nice. We always see that our CavanKerry Press authors know each other in some thread of what I like to call a very large literary community, but also very small, where we somehow find all one another. So it's really great to be here with you all this meeting. I will say a couple of things. This evening, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, as always. So in the chat box, please, if you hear anything that moves you, that is beautiful, that is heart-wrenching, please put that in the chat box down below. If you have any questions for either Jack or David this evening, please put it down below. And at the end, we will make sure we get to that. So for the run of show tonight, David, we're celebrating David's book, A Half-Life, woohoo, that comes out in February. I'm so excited for that book. It's such a wonderful book, and it's so nice to be publishing David's second collection with us, and I can't wait to hear from him very soon. So that you could still order, and you could still pre-order that book at CavanKerryPress.com. It's 20% off, folks. There we go. Gabriel Cleveland, our managing editor, is holding up A Half-Life. Super exclusive. He's the only person in the world that has this copy right now. So if you pre-order yours right now, as soon as we get it in February, it'll also be in your mailbox. So get on that, please. It's 20% off. You can't get this deal anywhere else, so make sure you do that. Thank you so much, Gabe. We'll also have a sale on Jack Ridl's book. Gabe, if you have that in your library, I don't know if I'm putting you up to the challenge, and if you do, he disappeared. He'll probably be back with that book too. Losing Season will also be 20% off today if you use the coupon code 2022. Look at that, the magician. 2022 for Losing Season. So that means you could get both books tonight for 20% off each. As an awesome, awesome gift for you in the beginning of 2022. All right, so let's get to it. As I said, David, we're celebrating him tonight, and he is going first, and then we will honor Jack later. So Jack, I am going to beam you out until later. Bye-bye. Okay, and to start with David, I'm going to read your bio and then I'll give you your time. So, David S. Cho was born and raised in the Chicago area, along with his brother and extended family, the proud children of Korean immigrants in the early 1970s. He holds a BA from the University of Illinois, MFA and MA from Purdue University, an MAT and PhD from the University of Washington, and has taught in West Lafayette and Crawfordsville, Indiana, Chicago, and Seattle and Tacoma, Washington, formerly an associate professor of English and director of the American Ethnic Studies program at Hope College. Shout out to Hope, Holland, Michigan. He now serves as the director of the Office of Multicultural Development at Wheaton College. He is the author of a chapbook, Song of Our Songs, in 2010, a book of poems, Night Sessions by Us, in 2011, and a scholarly monograph on 20th century Korean American novels, Lost in Transnation, 2017, and now in 2022, coming next month, A Half-Life. Ladies and gentlemen, David Cho.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. Just seeing a lot of the faces from places we've lived at is utterly amazing, whether it's here in Chicago, and Indiana, up in Michigan, and Seattle, of course, as well, and then back to Chicago. So thank you. I just want to thank all the folks at CavanKerry, Dimitri, Gabe, Joan, Joy. This has really been a journey. So to see this come to completion, I'm very, very grateful. And just wanted to recognize families, whether they're on or not, whether it's my Cho side, my dad's side, Yoon side, on my mom's side, my wife's family, the Lee family. I'm very grateful. Of course, my family of 5 for all the journeys that we've gone through. So thank you. Thank you all. And then I just wanted to mention a special shout out to Jack Ridl, who was a mentor of my mentor. So I feel like I am reading before a living legend right before me, who's really had such an impact on my life. So thank you, Jack, for that. So I got 20 minutes, I think. So I was actually going to start. My dad passed away a few years ago. If it's okay, just starting with the older book. Maybe this is a sales plug on Demetrius for the older book, but just a poem or two about my family growing up. We'll kind of travel from here in Chicago out to Seattle and then come on back And so you're kind of following my life journey, not only through the poetry, but the arc of my family's history as well. So this is for my dad. What is still is a title. When I was 10, it was easy to hear my father. His face poured over me, a silent moment of peering back. What is still is admiration for even a father's whisper. The body thick as the hair stalk was full, bone gazing at bone, fleshing peering into its own begotten. What is still is memory. In those days, I was content with silence, the moments of my father's face, the shadow hovering over me. Were those pauses prayer, one overly given to grieving? What son's wrong does he grieve? What man's work makes him cry rather than rest? What is still is grief. What was begotten cannot hold to memory. My father now leans against anything straight and writes himself, his backbone like his hair, only a whisper. Next poem is for my mom and her mom. The Feasting. Watch my mother fight the sun with her rag hat and loose white clothes that breeze with the summer wind. Watch her plant the seeds, tiny doggy, strawberry hard seeds in her left hand, trembling. Watch her hold the ground with the right hand, left arm hanging like a hose, paralyzed from a stroke 20 years ago. Watch my mother's right hand unwind the pear drawn down to a carcass, peeling counterclockwise this white freckled skin. She learned this from her mother. I've watched her do this every dinner since I was a boy, lips pressed, eyes narrowed, down to the knife on skin. She smiles and leaves a trail, one curled snake of white flesh. My mother leaned through my mother learned through hushed supper stories of her brother fleeing for the arms of some girl from the States, arranged not by custom, not from soul. Watch her mother cry until breathless, grandmother unwrapping the pear whole. Watch her son chew the pear, listen to hushed dinner stories retold. What whispers sounds like laughter, 20 years from the cry. I'm trying to go through my family. Here's one from my brother, the grandmother's watch. I have seen my brother's back become one high backpack yard of books. Not one book from class. Coming home, he'd carry them all. He would make like a mothers we've seen in photographs carrying their babies in rags at their back, like bundles of laundry to wash by hand, carrying the world on their hips. This is no myth. My grandmother, paralyzed by stroke, made her way to our yard and hoed it, planting onions, white bulbs and green tubes we ate for a year with soup, with stew, with rice. These women were as short as rice stalks, but close. And had I never teased them, I might be tall as a tree and not stout as a stump, carrying my books like Atlas's World, its ball chained to my shoulders, short-legged, bow-legged knees, pumping up and down as I walk home behind my brother from school. During dinner and homework after, our legs keep pumping like a twitch. We try not to bite our nails raw, like the hands of old widows with work to do. They might be watching. Here's the last poem from this book, Night Sessions. So kind of a homage to growing up, born and raised in Chicago. Night Sessions. Why my Korean brothers do not talk in class, I do not know. They wait like children around a piñata, waiting to strike the teacher's question, make the world turn with silencing answers of God. Late night talks of the eternal make them sleepy-headed for class, miss the assignments, pull all-night sessions to try and score perfectly, knowing it is too late, makes them work all the harder, their face furrowed, the color of ash. If you don't believe me, watch them play basketball at midnight. Stout Korean bodies flying, making their own pale light, making the ball rise like a red moon. A prayer thrown up to God, leaving books for exams stocked high behind in faith, leaving the silence of parents locked in stores, shoulders hunched, bow-legged, exhausted, wondering whether the children knew all this was done for you. How they love this game until dawn. Dark bodies, the soot of asphalt, thud into one another, the sharp pavement cut of shoes piercing the night, the silence of basketball leaving the palm. Better make it a good prayer. So Night Sessions, I'll circle down to the new book that Gabe had been flashing around earlier, Half-Life. I have the black and white copy here. Photo of my parents way back in Korea. It's a beautiful picture I've always had in my heart and mind, and I thought that would make for a great cover, and the CavanKerry staff loved it. So a few poems here from Seattle, kind of migrating over I-90 from Chicago all the way out to Seattle. A circle of fragments. Today in Seattle, it does not rain. I wish to kiss my son hello. The stomach of cashew nuts, smooth and curved, banana-like, once open, the color of light dirt. Radiating orbs of light, blue skies dark as the ocean, my bathed baby son, my contacts sink drained. Oh, glasses, your two-dimensional view, seeing less of the world so strangely pleases me. O circle of sharp edges, O fragmented length of your keys, your push, your pull causes me to circle you round and around you again. Existential poem number 1. I lean against a chair, arms hung low, expecting gravity to be suspended, a push exerting back to fill the air which would otherwise be nothing and find none. It's a contemporary creation. A design friend of mine would say that the curved arms of this chair exist for a reason, that even the surrounding space of the head, the arms, one's hips, that its form follows function, like the slender bow of reeds in the wind, or the curved contour of a shirt-hid shoulder, breath held like an open book's pages fluttering before its closing, breath that does not want to release its air because it is sweet air, exhale like one's cloudy exhalation of smoke, its cigarette rough sweetness savored on a gray day. Those shoulders, my friend says, are leveled into the arms, not unlike a young man's wound muscle, down to the knotted fists and fingers, collapsed into the thick seams of its curled length, bringing into presence an idea of its own design. Existential poem number 2. Can sound transgress from the mouth of a crying baby to the deaf ears of a father's deep slumber? Does a physicist consider wavelengths, its particle matter shooting through the walls of air sound? Is the muted silence of such deafness truly dumb? Can a father fear the death of a son when that son has not yet come into existence? And upon that moment when a son gazes into the face of his progenitor, can a son fear for his father's life before even understanding the meaning of his own, like a peony's bud blossoming into fullness, a poem in the mind of a poet? Today, I hold the face of my son, whose death I fear will someday floor me, whose wrinkled brow bears to light our likeness, whose eyes direct gaze stare at me like my father's, his thinning gait looking more like a young boy's. Today, hold the face of my son, 2 hands square in his cheeks. He kisses me, lips apart, as if to suck the marrow from my cheek, as if to say hello for the first and last time. And this is last of those existential poems. The grumble and creak, moans of wood in the house when all are asleep, the clicking of claws in a pail we use to store the just bought crab. Front window sun shadows fall through the air gridded, beam dust suspended within, suddenly stopping at the back door. The skeletal shells of the crabs we have just eaten, odd pale noises we still hear. The quandary of knocking on my bathroom door to get my son out. He's locked in. Open the door, we say. Turn the knob. It's easy. The slow gyration of the handle stopping, not knowing what else to do, responding to our door knock. He knocks back. And this is the last one from the Seattle years. In half-closed shades, a vein wishes to let in half-closed shades, a vein wishing to let in the morning warm yet still cool. I know a door in my bedroom exists because its darkness remains in long squares, longer than the morning light. A seagull's cry from the canal pierces miles of absent gray turning to pastel light. Shells cracking, evergreen seeds growing ready to leave their nestle. A dark blue and black blanket, checkered, surround my children, nestled within the friction. Sparks that leap into the still yet night light. I'm going to read a poem from the second section of this book. These are about a fictional family, the Kim family from Chicago. The pastor's family. It's not modeled on mine. Father was not a pastor's family. And, I'll read, for time's sake, just one that I'm going to dedicate to Mr. Chang. When I was in Indiana, I heard of these Vietnam war vets from Korea, and their stories really struck me, and I thought I'd read a poem from there. If I can find it within the given moment. Just give me a second here. This poem is called The Edge for Mr. Chang from Indianapolis. I think is down in Atlanta from what I hear now. Okay. To know Mr. Smith, You have to know that in the 70s, he would travel around, marvel at the excitement of America's secret white flower, cocaine, but would never join in. Marvel that to some dope was a funny joke, to others good journalism, and to most something to be enjoyed, like a cigarette from another world, or at least one that would take you there. Smoke a joint maybe, drink past the midnight hour, definitely, but never past the point of passing out. To lose that moment of alert wakefulness, even in times of peace, was to lose his edge. Even more so after the Korean and Vietnam Wars, the edge, he would tell Harry and his kids, is like the time I went to a bar in Texas. Saw a lovely Latina sitting alone. Such beauty matched with such loneliness was like a lost wallet of money suddenly found, like that parable from Jesus himself. Why not sit in silence together? Or speak with broken English sighs, or let whatever may come between us arise like the moon and stars together. Her English was fine, and so fine was our conversation, her boyfriend came and asked me to step outside for a lesson, that he would teach me a thing or two. No, thank you, I said in my best broken Konglish. And he began making like a train, smoke billowing from the top of his head and ears, dark things coming from his smokestack of lips. He asked me to step outside again. I said, I speak no English, no Americanese. Then in perfect American English, I growled, so take it easy, dude. People laughing so hard, it sounded more like wolves howling at the moon, which brought only more heat from his head, more smoke and dark things from his mouth, like a stovetop, and told him, if I had a skillet, I would have made a meal, fried fish or an egg on his head. He made a fist, and I made bad, laughing at the insolence of his youth. In Korea, in a split second, I would have slapped him, flipped over a table, my friends holding me back. But here in America, and he's so much bigger than me, he hit me, and he hit me again. His friends pulling out metal knuckles, rocks, pipes, anything outside or under their coats, all hitting me groaning with laughter, then stopping when seeing their fleshy abdomens in the corner of my eyes. I back kicked like a mule, front kicked like an American football punter, side kicked like a ballerina. No more laughing, no more chatter, music no longer, only heads getting hotter, more dark things from their mouths, fists, shoes, hitting me until a hot sweetness, black like liquor, filled my back. My spine, the bitterness filling my mouth. The police even came, used batons. Even then, I kicked past beyond my hour of consciousness like your father, who prays with such passion after and before a long day of work, crying as if to ask for the dead to come alive, as if to ask that his own life could be taken, as if another poor soul would instead be blessed. I kicked swiftly at the pin-sized image of their bodies from the side of my eyes. Yes, those puny eyes they were screaming about. If you don't believe me, check it out in the newspapers. They locked me away until I remembered my last name again. It took years, but I'm here. It keeps me awake when at night I need to fight off the sleep. And when sleeping, I remember and arise. Though the day is yet dark to me in the world, I arise to take back those years lost to me. I arise to the moon, greet the dawning sun to be here, and laugh about it with you. The Edge for Mr. Chang. Pastors, brothers, journey, I guess, through America. So that's just one from that section. I'll round out the time with two last poems. One is one that took me 25 years to write, if you can believe it. And this one was triggered because all my friends, when they heard I was getting an MFA in poetry, their first question always was, have you written a love poem to your wife yet? And stupid me, I had never done that. So I started, and 25 years later, here's where I'm at. And so this will go from Seattle back to Chicago through the fictional Kim family. So a love poem for my wife. Today the wind blows. It is Chicago and it is cold. So cold, the wind has streaked the clouds into puddle blues, still with resolve, or so it seems. So resolved, the sun tries to set itself lower on the horizon. Lower in Chicago means dropping beneath the line of cement, steel, sand, and lake water. The cemented gray of exhaust and snow, salt-ridden tires, highways covering the city like a maze, cars scurrying like mice. And back to the subject, I do not know why I do not write love poems to my wife. A question asked of me when plain faces turn quizzical, an opening of the eye, a circling twitch of the lips. I do not know why I do not write love poems to my wife. Today, it snows in Chicago. The wind carries a flurry or flurries off the lake. The wind so brusque, it carries itself off the frozen lake, the snow suddenly stopping. It is windy in Chicago. Today, I wish a love poem for my wife would arise, like this broken windowed, 3-storied red brick building, arise from a field of long dead Chicago grass, yellowed, the whispers of wheat and prairie grass in its head, holding the promise of spring. This building set atop this field, set atop timber, steel, and cut stone cylinders in this muddy marsh, this great layer of jelly, this Chicago cake of clay, water, and gravel. A love poem for my wife would rise like the sun over Lake Michigan, a red, hazy blanket, like the sun setting, a dark crown over this field, this building, this second city, this city of impossible contradiction, this city of two seasons, winter and construction, this city whose fall season is too short, yet too golden, burnt orange and brown fall leaf glorious. The city of animals, the bears, cubs, bulls, and apparel, the White Sox. This city of hard work, harder vowels, consonants, and sharp syllables. You can hear it in the mellifluous staccato of its heroes, Mike Ditka, Dick Butkus, Walter Payton. You could hear it in the rattling barrage of the L, the elevated train crisscrossing the city. You see the red lights, this scarlet pair of eyes fading in the distance, wheel sparks on the steel tracks, creating its own heat, creating its own swishing wind, the winter gale off the lake, creating a swirl of snow. This windy city of my birth, this city of broad shoulders. For this Korean-American woman I so love, finally, a love poem. Romantic, right? Okay. And here's the last poem. It's called The Hyphen. Wrap this up. Last poem. This was actually inspired at a previous school I worked at. So there was a term people used for me. So as I was writing this poem, I dropped it in here. I know some families might have some kids on. So I won't read the word. I'll let you imagine, take it over. Or I guess you could buy the book as they flashed it earlier for sale. 20% off, I think they said. And I'll just insert a different word, but I'll hold my hand so you know when and where that might be. Okay. So this is for Asian America. The hyphen. I am a flickering flame's wick. A wick. Let me start again. The hyphen. Let me get in front of me. The hyphen. I am a flickering flame's wick. A wicker basket's weaving line, seen and unseen. I am the glory hallelujah child between a dash and nothing. The interrupted lines of a road. An elongated period, a blot stretched long, a cat whisker, nose hair, eyebrow plucked, floating, tossed midair, tweezed by two parabolic lines hung together by a metal wishbone hip, itself hung together between the thumb and index finger, the trigger, a pointus digitus secundus. I have a friend named Hung. He actually might be listening right now, an age-old Korean name for older brother, Hyung, who upon immigration, his fifth grade teacher pronounced Hung, baptizing him a new creation without water, without the spirit, without even a dove, reborn to a life of questions of his endowment, biological measurements, peaks at the urinal, countless chalkboard games of the four-lettered hangman. I'm a sidewise comma with no bend, an exclamation point turned horizontal, a blip of ink filling the pores of a blank page, period dropped, a blip of space, bandwidth of light, ones and zeros off, then on, visual code seen, unseen, flash of light, in filling the screen like cyberspace rain. The line of what was and what is like an Asian American, all that excitement, silence, the pain, sorrow, and joy, a half dash, the line between two worlds, I am. Thank you, everyone. So appreciate being with you.
Yes, David, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Oh man, I'm gonna try this year to just sit in every poet or every memoirist that we come across, because your work is just so amazing. And also because I identify, although I am Latina instead of Asian, like I identify with the hyphenations, right? And how that's kind of imposed on us. So I want to talk a bit about that, and we'll talk about that a bit later during the chat. Thank you so much. And thank you also for dropping Night Sessions, which is also a very important collection to the press and to you. And by the way, you can get Night Sessions for 20% off. On this reading, we also added it to be 20% off with the coupon code 2022. So you can walk away with 3 books for 20% off. So think about that. Think about Night Sessions. All right, David, I'll beam you out until later. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you. Okay. And now I am going to find Jack Ridl in this long list of people. So just give me a second until I can run into him. The Ridls. Okay, there we are. Hey, Jack, how are you? Nice to see you. Let me read your bio, and then we'll get right into it. Okay. So Jack Ridl, Poet Laureate of Douglas, Michigan, population 1,100. In April 2019, release St. Peter and the Goldfinch by Wayne State University Press. His Practicing to Walk Like a Heron, WSU Press, 2013, was awarded the National Gold Medal for Poetry by Forward Review's Indie Fab. His collection, Broken Symmetry, WSU Press, was co-recipient of the Society of Midland Authors Best Book of Poetry Award for 2006. His Losing Season by CavanKerry Press was named the best sports book of the year for 2009 by the Institute for International Sports. Then Poet Laureate Billy Collins selected his Against Elegies for the Center of Book Arts Chapbook Award. Every Thursday following the 2016 election, he sent out a commentary and poem. The students at Hope College named him both their outstanding professor and their favorite professor. And in 1996, the Carnegie Foundation named him Michigan Professor of the Year. More than 900 of Jack's students are published, several of whom have received First Book Awards, national honors. For further information about Jack, his website is www.ridl.com. That's www.riddle.com. And again, his book is also on sale for 20% off today. Jack, take it away.
Thank you, Dimitri. One correction. I don't think I had 900 students in my entire life. It's 90, but that's quite astonishing in itself.
Sorry.
No, don't be. I'm the one that was so lucky to have all those people. My goodness. I'm going to be accompanied tonight by Rob Carnegie on the guitar. He's going to play some background for me. I keep seeing these people I miss, and it's so wonderful to have Zoom because, I love the pandemic. You know, I get to see all these people that otherwise I'd never get to see, and it really does touch this what goes for a heart here. So thanks, Dimitri, Gabe, Joy, Joan, whose computer blew up in her face, the whole staff. Thank you, Baron, for believing in this book a long time ago, or it would not have happened. And thank you, David, for a reading that you've stuck me with trying to follow, and for saying yes to my joining you, and for very brave poems. I thank you all for being here. And now that I've taken up my 20 minutes, good night. I'm going to read from Losing Season, which if you buy it from me, it's 80% off. I was asked to send this book to Michelle and Barack Obama when there was a real president, and I inscribed it. And I always read from this copy. It's all falling apart. But I inscribed it. I don't know if you can see this. It doesn't matter. But I inscribed it for Barack and Michelle Obama. He was an Irish Kenyan. You didn't know it, did you? Yes, he was an Irish Kenyan. So then I fixed that. But that was so funny that I just did that. Anyway, so the first poem, I'm the son of a basketball coach. That's where I grew up. My father's side, all sports. My mother's side of the family, all circus people. And I'm still at almost age 78, struggling to discover what reality is really all about. When Sports Illustrated wrote an article about my father, the writer, he spent about 5 days with the family, and the writers, I was gone by then teaching, and the writer said to my father, well, I'm going to do this article about you, but the thing is, this is really weird. Here you are, this big time Division I, ranked in the top 10 basketball coach, but your kid's a poet. That is really weird. And my father said, just a minute. Let me help you with what's really weird. What's really weird is the center of American culture is what I do. And what I do is dress guys up in funny little shorts, and they bounce a ball and they try to put it through a ring. And then at the other end, they try to stop the other people in these little outfits from trying to put a ball in a ring. And all my son does is try to write about American experience. So which one do you really think is weird? And so I dedicate this, whenever I read from this, to my wonderful father who always had that kind of presence of mind. So I'm going to start with this book was actually put together to read as you're reading along through it. It's put together to be a novel that you make up. After X number of poems, you start thinking, wait a minute, I'm starting to think like I'm reading a novel here. And a few people have told me that worked. And this is a good way to start it off, because all these guys are trying out for the high school ball team. And this is called First Cut, which means, the coach is going to cut X number of players off the team. And there's a few left. First cut. The night before, 8 of the players slept. Each of the rest lay wondering if his name would be on the list. Tomorrow, we'll post first cuts, coach had said. If you're on the list, you're still on the team. If your name isn't there, he shrugged. 22 would go to look, hoping to find themselves among the chosen. For years, their names were only something they had answered to. But now, hurled back to the earth's first days, they could feel the finger of the caller of names point. God said Smith, and Smith walked on among the elect. On the wall next to Coach's office door, the list. Some came early, stood, stared, and left. Some waited. Coach had told them not to say a word. Some held out past lunch, then gave in, went, and saw. That night, Coach called the chosen together at center court. All right, he said, you made it this far. There's going to be one more cut. 12 of you will make it. We'll go one more week. Now, wind sprints. The others went to look for something else to do. Wished they'd never tried. Felt a fire burning around their names. Coach has a daughter, and she's reached the age where Coach doesn't understand anything. Yeah, that's about all you know. He has a daughter, and she's reached that age. Coach's daughter. She stares at her cornflakes. What's the matter? Coach asks honestly. She raises her eyes. What is it? She wants to say nothing. Everyone says nothing. Her lips tighten. He thinks she is beautiful. He is afraid of her. Her soft hair, her long fingers, her eyeshadow. He tries not to think about the country between them. He wants to hear her say, it's okay here. You're welcome here. But this country goes on for as long as you can walk. There are no borders. Coach knows he needs borders. One of the characters in the book, I just called her Stats, STATS, short for statistics. And she's that young high school woman that the poem will describe, that I think several or maybe even many of you will recognize. Stats. Halfway up the bleachers, next to the cinder block wall, she sits with her score sheets and freshly sharpened pencils. She skips dinner to make sure she gets her lucky seat, buys a couple hot dogs, bag of popcorn, cup of Diet Coke. During the day, her words are never right. She keeps them clogged between her knees and neck. Sometimes she can feel a noun break free and wander in her brain. But the adjectives are worst of all, anarchic, full of terrifying ambushes, threats to all the silences she's built, one avoided conversation at a time. What words are hers, she keeps along her tongue, lets them out in sleep. Yes, home, dance, sky. After the game, she adds the players' shots attempted, made, assists, lost balls, and rebounds. She files them in a dresser drawer beneath her socks. I decided to read this. Yesterday, of course, was a day set aside for Martin Luther King, and I was at a meeting where the discussion was, have we gotten anywhere? And the consensus was we've gotten somewhere, not terribly far. There's still a lot of, as David said, this. And one night back in 1958, so pre-King and pre-civil rights, and a number of you people who are so wonderfully here tonight that I know have heard this story, so you can get up and go get a Coke or something. Anyway, one night he, you play five guys. Okay, so one night he started in the game 3 black players. So it's 3 blacks, 2 whites. And the next morning the phone rang and it was the president, and he called him in. And Dad came home at lunch and we said, well, what was that all about? Why'd you get called in? He said, well, the president, who was a Southern Baptist minister, the president said to me, he said, I'm getting a lot of calls. Next game, and he held up 2 fingers, 2. Well, that just scared the wits out of us. My sister, me, my mom. This is our livelihood, and what's he going to do? And that's all I said. And then sort of in keeping with the way he talked to that Sports Illustrated guy, I finally took a deep breath and said, Dad, what are you going to do? And he just very quietly said, oh, next game. And he held up 4 fingers. And he did it. And at that point, civil rights part wasn't really part of our consciousness. So he just did it. So I'll read this poem in response to that experience. It's called Coach in Effigy. You know, everybody knows that, right? How you create an image of somebody and then you hang them from a tree like they're being lynched. Coach could be Coach lynched, and Coach in Effigy. His daughter saw him first. hanging from the maple that draped its old arms over the house, his head blooming from the rope that strangled his neck. In the morning's moonlight, she read their name scrawled like a scar across his chest. She remembered the way his hands had held her. Years ago, when, bloodied from a fall, she'd let the scream we all carry go to him. He seemed to hold it in his hands. Now, within this losing season, she wants to take this anonymous lynching in her arms. Ask the hands that made it and the fists that rose against it to join, stand around her as she sings the only song. Lets the head rest, lets the heart give out. We'll finish up the basketball here with a poem. Each section, it's in 4 quarters. Isn't that clever? The book is in 4 quarters, and each quarter closes with the gym closing. And this is called, Closing the Gym. Closing the Gym. Equipment man wonders for a second if he's forgotten anything. The dryers are off, the uniforms are stacked, the shoes are out to air. He put out his pipe, cleaned the blackboard, fixed the zipper and Watts's warm-up, turned off the radio, turned off the lights, locked the door. A stiff wind blows across the parking lot. He sees a car, its motor running, the exhaust a cloud floating almost frozen. He walks to his car, scrapes the windshield, thinking of his wife and how in high school here, after a game, they'd fumble under each other's woolen coats, not knowing that their hands were learning how to hold them through a life filled with repairs. And I'd like to finish. There's an interesting thing about this poem. Some of you may be familiar with the magazine Rattle, and that they have a poem every day. And then usually once a week, they have one where it's called Poets Respond. And it's usually a poem written by somebody responding, obviously, to something currently happening in our culture. And I think I know why this happened, but this poem was chosen to be on that Poet Respond thing. And it ended up at the end of the year, 2021, that this was the most read and the most shared poem that Rattle had. And it's okay for me to say that because it has absolutely little to nothing to do with me. It's not a pat on the back. It's a realization about what we're living within that happened. And it's called The Last Day of November. And you probably remember what happened on the last day of November. My wife is at her spinning wheel. She first cleans, dries, and combs the fleece, then dyes the wool. She will spin yarn to make a shawl, stocking cap, socks. She disappears into her gentle quiet. I am a third of the way through reading 4 books, but I don't want to read any of them. I want what I know you want, to be happy, actually happy, to love in a happy world. Today, there was yet another school shooting. Some students felt it coming. 3 kids who thought they were grown up, dead. One more thought likely to die, did. The others will live. The news dares to say, recover. Tonight, we played Christmas carols for the first time this season. Yes, 'tis the season. This morning, surgeons at 3 different hospitals awakened, assuming yet another routine day of rounds and operations. When they were 17, did they imagine Advent would offer them the inevitable impossibility of saving the assumption of a future? That they would never again be able to say, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, without being caught in an ambush of memory. Tonight, thousands of parents will be unable to sleep, or tomorrow, or on into ever. Teachers who each day hope it will not, cannot happen again, will think again about construction or an office job. And guns, they will sleep in the garage, a cabinet on the top shelf. They will rest and be at the ready. No, I don't want to read. I don't want to hear again about God's mercy, the peace that comes from above, or meditation, Calvin's endlessly facile legacy of blame, the need for prayer and legislation. I am tired of pursuing happiness. I want to breathe it in as ubiquitous as air. And while we're at it, I want the curriculum revised to teach sentimentality. That it is not any more false feeling than the unguarded synapses in the shooter's brain. Scholars, put away the safety of secondary sources. Sit with your students. Abandon the inhumane hideaway of objective distance. Throw open your hearts. Let sentiment break our shielded souls before another rifle and surgeon's words have to. My wife never asks for the meaning. She sits in silence at her wheel, twisting a lamb's wool into yarn to knit whatever it takes to keep another warm. Our dog is asleep, head on his paws. The twin sister cats curl together. I'm not going to pick up my books. I'm going to begin to trim the tree, wondering how many 5-year-olds will sit on Santa's lap. And when he asks, what do you want for Christmas? We'll answer, a gun. Thank you very much for the invitation and for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jack. Man. Ooh, that poem cuts and fires in a bunch of different ways. And I just want to sit with that for a second. And the importance of recognizing things, and the importance of talking about these issues and coming about it in a way where you're looking at it from all of these different angles, which is very important. And those different paths of which you go, the lengths in that poem, and then that turn at the end where they're wishing for a gun, and how we acculturate ourselves into this gun culture and this gun practice, and it's just becoming just a part of the culture. And I guess that's the thing to ask too, like, what is culture, and what becomes a part of the culture, and what's good and what's not so good for us. And maybe that's a great way to open up the conversation and just talk about the humanity of it. And again, everyone, thank you, Jack, and thank you, David, for those wonderful, wonderful readings. Now we're going to start discussion in the Q&A section. So if you're ready, please, audience, Put your questions and comments down in the chat box. They'll love to read your comments and we'll forward them your questions. Right now, this one actually comes from our managing editor, Gabe, who has been nice enough to put all 3 books on for 20% off today. Gabe says, you each have a tremendous ability to illuminate daily life and human moments so brightly you can see them through the pores. I was wondering if you could talk about the process of paying such close attention to human interaction and experience to be able to bring people to life so successfully on the page.
I think David
Maybe,
should go. You go, David.
You go.
You, David, then me. You want me to go?
Yep, please.
Well, first, that's a mighty compliment. So the first thing is you want to say, really? But the second thing is probably well, it's pretentious, but it's something that somebody else said, and that is that just the way I tend to look at things is that the spirituality of everyday life. And in another poem, I could put it this way too, in another poem, there's a line, I have a line that says, I want to be religious in this unimportant way. So I think part of it is that I think religions have been usurped, stolen, captured by doctrines and churches and things like that, and taken out of the world. And so I think I just suck it up and try to pay attention to the world. And then the other thing is that we raised our daughter. This is it's not a silly example. It's trying to get at it from Emily Dickinson's slant business. And that is, we raised our daughter that we just told her outright at about age 5, you're always going to be sad. So what you need to do is to be loyal to your joy. It's really a takeoff on William Blake saying, I'll paraphrase him, but William Blake saying that at a certain point, joy and sorrow take one another's hands and keep on walking. And the key thing in that last poem is that he doesn't say to hell with the tree. David has those marvelous existential poems, and that's probably the most existential moment in that poem, because it's an act of choice and will. And I'll trim the tree, damn it, So I'm broken.
Thank you, Jack.
The tree. Yeah. David? Yeah.
Yeah, it's always hard to talk after Jack. Legend has really shaped my life. So I think for me, it goes back to like when I went to the MFA, I totally did know what I was doing. It's a long story. And Marianne Baruch had us keep an image journal, and any detailed image you get, just to write it down on a notebook. And I'm doing this because I remember vividly she was saying she saw a young boy, still a mistake, kind of rubbing his fingers with the dime inside so hard she could actually see the imprint of the dime on the 2 fingers. She's like, that's the I want you to get in your image journal. And I've always tried to capture that no matter what. And I found through that, or engaging all the senses or something akin to that, just great vivacity of life, whether it's the joys or sorrows, like Jack is saying. It's kind of a choice to note those details and get it down and allow that to be the venue by which these poems emerge. So whether, listening to the bird noise in Seattle, right? The seagulls crying, or a lot of brick in Chicago, right? Some of that thing going on. Yeah, it's just kind of noting those details, slowing down, replaying it, and putting it on the page and allowing that to go wherever it needs to. So.
I don't want to dive in, except that these kinds of things happen in these. What David has just said reminds me, in my intro to poetry writing class, I always handed out the first day this cartoon by Matt Groening, of The Simpsons. And the cartoon is this big parade going by, this gigantic parade. And there's all this crowd watching this parade. And I put a caption on it. He didn't. I put the caption on that said, find the poet. And if you look really close at this, down in the right-hand corner, there's this little kid, and he's watching these ants walk by, and that's it. And that's just exactly what David does in those poems. Everybody's watching the parade. Our job is to say what's not being. What are we not noticing? What do we need to notice that we're not noticing? And it's our job.
And then also how taking those things that no one else is noticing and putting them all together, right? And creating some sort of magic or some kind of different, like a Mod Podge display of what our processes are like, either if that's emotional, mental, or just how we interact with one another, right? I think it's great how Jack, in your poem, it's metaphorized the effigy poem and this idea of the metaphorical lynching, but then you're also talking about that maple and how we could bring those two things together. And what does that mean when we put two different objects together? And what kind of story does that paint? Or like thinking about the birds of Seattle and then the bricks in Chicago, and what happens when those two images meet on the page, right? What does it create? Yeah, that thing right there, right? Like that duality, Jack, what you did with your fist, that friction, or that cohesion that happens, which is quite special. Which speaking of cohesion, Tamara, our social media coordinator, who's on the call also, she's coming out with a book this year also. And so emerging poets are always trying to think of ways that they could put things and find perspective in anything that we're hearing. So Tamara was asking for Jack and for David, what's the process like putting a book together of poems that kind of flow chronologically or paint some sort of picture from one section or one poem to the other? So how do you craft a narrative from just poems to create a larger story?
You get to go first, David, this time.
Oh, what a question. Oh, man. I guess the first thought that comes to my mind is, you keep up with that homework that Marianne gave to me a long time ago. Hopefully you'll get poems as beautiful as some of my other mentors, Tom Andrews, Bridget Kelly, Jax as well. I always feel like it's kind of like walking in the wilderness is my answer. I feel like you have these great set of poems you compiled for a period of time. Some maybe you set out to link together. In this one, it kind of was like a wild stab thinking I was a crazy man and then contacting CavanKerry to see if they thought I was a crazy man. And I think the answer is yes, but they liked it. And so I think it's like writing a poem. It's almost like it's like a prayer. I feel like you get this thing inside of you, you flesh it out on paper, you share it, and you just kind of see what's going on. So that really is how it worked. And then as I worked with also Baron Wormser, I needed to thank you as well. The narrative, what holds that set of poems together, just kind of grew and grew and grew. And that's why I appreciate working with CavanKerry. It's kind of a partnership to figure that out. So that's how it's been for me for both books, actually. Asian American poems from the Midwest doesn't seem like the hot ticket, right? It's got to be New York area. And, so take a walk in the wilderness, see where you're going to end up. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, David. That was great. Jack?
Well, for me, there's two different kinds of books. This book is really is composed as a novel, so I needed a through line, which was the season. That was pretty easy. And then the second part was I need a lead character, so that becomes Coach. So everything that revolves around him as you go through, even if it's stats or even if it's the equipment man, I learned that from my father. He always pays special attention to those people because he knew that without them, there's no him. It wasn't, So there was that for that book, and then thinking in that book, there is never a poem about the game, and that was interesting to think. It's all growing up that way. Was everything for me was behind the scenes. So there's sports in the book. There's bus driver. There's sports writer. There's referee. There's all these different characters that all have some kind of relation to the season as it goes along, and also to Coach, who's the main character. In the other books, they're primarily reflective and meditative poems, more than character studies. And with those, I always start with the title and then just see what happens. And then when I put it together, in one of those books, I had all these poems in one section. The editor said, well, why? I said, they're nature poems. She said, you're not a nature poet. What are you putting them all in there? They're all about something else. They're not about nature. And so they get sprinkled all through the book. You know, I think some people would say it's just a big hodgepodge, but that's kind of okay with me. I think of those kinds of books as art galleries, where there's all kinds of different kinds of art on display. So I don't worry about that. You know, I figure if somebody doesn't like that, they don't like that. I'm not crazy about somebody saying that's not the right way to do it. I just find those kinds of people funny.
Yeah.
But you're picking up on that. That is something that I believe makes the poem, and you could feel it all through David's poems. And that is two things. One, sound. The language has to work as sound. If you didn't understand the language, you would hear the music. And then the second one is whatever it's about here, it has to at least suggest the other. So, which you said. And so that it doesn't have to be equal, of course, but anything in the poem can. So the kids who make the team, what's the opposite? The kids who don't make the team, and what's the affect of the one versus the affect of the other? It's they become completely different people. So it's not just about sports or making the team.
Right.
That's not it. They're more metaphorical for the human condition, you know.
Yeah. You make an interesting point there, Jack, because then this kind of goes back to the Matt growing picture that you gave your students when they were told to find the poet. And there was that one student, that one child looking at the ants. It almost even seems like you need everyone there in order to complete that poem, right? You know, like if a poem is fractal, if there's a bunch of different edges, that we need those people watching the parade as well as, looking at the ants, as well as the people participating in the parade being the parades or the people that are going down, right? Whatever word that is. And that's interesting in terms of choices. Laura Donnelly said for both David and Jack, that she struck how the books were read tonight from the both of you, and they were both including some autobiographical and fictional characters. So this is kind of like a shop question, a choice question. Could you talk a bit about what moving into fictional characters opens up in your poetry? And maybe you could talk about that in tandem when we're thinking about those, that duality of the more directly autobiographical poems. So basically kind of negotiating the difference between creating these characters or having real characters that you add fictionalized events or moments to versus things that are strictly autobiographical. Did that make sense? Mm-hmm. Did I do a good job? Okay, cool. So you guys can take that question.
Go ahead, David.
This is probably my first stab in a fictional character, though this is one that appears in sessions that kind of grew from there. So I think for me, people used to argue is nonfiction or fiction, which has the truest fictional element, and so it begets that argument. So what I think what the fiction allows me to do is to dive almost what the young folks do. It seems like with Minecraft, you build your whole world right in front of you. So you get that chance to do that. I'm not a Minecraft person. Sorry. I just probably removed myself from a younger audience. Autobiography is kind of almost like self-counseling. You're delving into your past, and as you write it down, you're making sense of that world. Where in the fiction allows you to free up and kind of create that world as you see. So for me, it's just trying to pay homage, I think, in the fictional sense of an era, maybe 80s, 90s for Korean Americans in Chicago when no one really knew about them here in the area. And I was a child of all that. And writing about that world, a pastor's family, especially in worlds that I was always around but not in. And it's my way of diving into that. Got to do research, read, reflect. Or I think or autobiographical elements, really just diving into your soul in a sense, right? So constructing one versus kind of being more introspective is how I see largely the differences, which ultimately could be the same, but yeah.
Right. Mining, going back to the Minecraft mining, you never know what ore you're going to hit, right? Are you going to hit something super autobiographical? Are you going to hit something that you can kind of embellish and grow upon based off of an experience that's interesting? Thank you. I'm never going to not see Minecraft. So I think one knows what Minecraft is. You have to Google it because you'll never be the same after that. Jack?
Well, first of all, Laura Donnelly's first two books, and she has two books, are both major award-winning books. And so I'd like, and one of them has a lot of things based on her own autobiography. So I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to have Laura answer the question.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No, but no, she's shaking her head no. Okay, I'll take my responsibility. For me, everything is a kind of an affective, even if it's fiction, it's an affective autobiography. Meaning stats is sitting up there and I'm writing out of empathy. So it's really not only stats, it's also about empathy. And then thinking of the opposites, a lot of people have said, your father was this big deal coach and he was a winning coach and a Hall of Fame coach and all this stuff. Why in the world losing season? And that's because losing had the greater impact on my sister and me than winning. Winning was just, we didn't lose. Losing was picking up the paper the next day. And I always wanted the person who sold cars, his kid, to pick up the paper and say, car salesman blows sale at the end of the day. You know, there ought to be a whole section about every profession where they realize there are children of this coach out there who's getting hammered because he lost. It's a terrible culture, terrible sports. Don't think it's a good one. It's not. It's vicious. It's cruel. And so, you know, that was fairly easy. And now David talked about 25 years to write a love poem. And I think his wife deserves everything that David gives her for that. This basketball book actually took 25 years. I just kind of wrote it one poem once in a while. I'd go, oh my goodness, yes, the referee. I got to have a referee in there somewhere. And his wife at home missing him. He's off at this silly thing called a game. So yeah, in one sense, I could argue it's just for fun. I could argue it's all autobiographical, either through seeing with Marianne Baruch and David's talking about that. You know, what else is it?
Yeah.
Even if you make it up, you made it up. So.
Right. And that's the thing, like David was talking about with autobiographies or nonfiction, where does it blur the lines between like fiction and real, right? Even with fiction, I have this thing about it because it's like, it's coming from you when you're writing it, right? That's the truth there, right? That's the reality. That's as real as it gets. You're putting your thoughts on a page and creating this story. Whatever happens there is, happenstance. But yeah, very interesting. David, I wanted to ask you this question, and we're about to wrap up, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for such a long time on Facebook and right here on Zoom. Just say again, we are celebrating Jack and David, especially David, because David's book is coming out next month, A Half-Life. That's going to be coming out in February with us, CavanKerry Press. That's going to be available for 20% off. And you can get Losing Season and David's first book, Night Sessions, for 20% off. Also, with the coupon code, you guessed it, 2022. So that's 3 books for 20% off. Okay, now back to the question. Mika Rowe said, Dr. David Cho, how has your experience as an Asian American shaped you? And what was your wife's reaction to the love letter for her?
Boy, if I go backwards, what was her reaction? I think you probably all guess a love poem was about a Chicago red brick building. Like, so enough said there. I told her that it took me 25 years for that one. So unless you want to wait 25 years more. And on the first one, I guess my answer at age 49 is how has it shaped me? How has it not shaped me? I feel like, especially in the Chicago area growing up, it just kind of gave you a pair of lenses, whether it was joyful or painful, as the last poem talked about, to see it from that lens and to honor it and to grow into it, which is partly why the first thing I wanted to do when I could was offer up my parents' photo for the front of the book, right? Shaped me, my cousins shaped me, my family shaped me in a profound way that I remember. My grandmother, who I grew up with, it just shaped me in a profound way. So to not do that would be to kind of erase culture. And I'm not a big fan of that. So, yeah, I don't know if it's a more specific answer I should be able to provide, but I think from tip to toe, including what hair I have in my head or not, it has shaped me, shaped the way I view the world, even the things I don't know or have gotten to know over the years living in Seattle, the research, and Indiana. I think there was a question about that, another one, has shaped me in a profound way. So, I mean, I was just thinking when Jack was reading, a lot of poems are about sports between us both, right? Similar topic matter, but the vantage point is so different. So these lives, these cultural elements do shape you in profound ways. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and you were actually you also referenced Diane's question, which was talking about how Indiana appears, because you talk about Chicago and Seattle. Is there a little piece, either imagistically or experientially, of Indiana in there as well?
Yeah, there are a lot of poems devoted to Indiana actually as well. So I consider that kind of my baptism by fire. So you'll get that. So I'm very grateful for my time. I have this deep love for Indiana. When I taught at Wabash College in West Central Indiana, deep love for the place, those painted bridges, homes, all sorts of things. Those barns. I just love those red barns. So there's like a real soft spot in my heart for Indiana.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I have one last question for you, and this question is by Jen Freyer Griggs, and is, where do both of you find hope? Where do both of you find hope?
Boy, are we answering this well. David, tell me what to say.
And you'll have no more hope. Let's see here. It's not that it's difficult to answer the question, though it's such a heavy philosophical question to answer and to end on. I think in my life, partly being Korean American, growing in Chicago area, I grew up in the church. So I think the faith component is something that's not a prefabricated thing in my life. If it weren't for direct things happening in my life, I don't think I'd have that perspective. And so it's kind of this otherworldly perspective that I feel like is a lens that has been a guiding light for me in my life. So that would be my honest answer.
Well, no, go ahead, David. Keep going if you. No, okay. I want to preface mine by, yesterday I looked at a poetry site that came up, and there was a poem by this guy, Dimitri Reyes. And then today, another poetry site comes up. There's Dimitri again. The man is taking over the internet. I don't know what to do, but I'm very happy for him. He's kicking the old scribbler right off the net here.
No way. No way. Couldn't be here without you guys. Couldn't be here without the two of you.
Yes, we clear the way, don't we? Okay, I don't want this to sound snide. I don't pay any attention to it at all. None. Absolutely none. I've got a dog. I have a wonderful wife. I have a child. I have a daughter. I have 2 cats. I've got things to do. I have people to love. I have people to take care of. I have people dying right and left. Man, if I started thinking about hope, I would be in despair. That does not mean hopeless. It doesn't mean I'm hopeless. It just means I have other things. Don't even think about it. Thank you, Charlie, for nodding. I need that support. Yeah. It gets misunderstood. But Dante, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. He had something else in mind, but not me. Not me. Now, if you said, I'm going with love. I'll just go with charity at the end of the list.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that makes sense. Spreading kindness even, right? Like, I don't know how many of you at home are getting emails from Jack, but every time I get an email from Jack, this is like after party stuff, I get a wonderful picture of a cat or a dog. And it gives me so much joy, and I think that's the importance, right? Like, I think we find hope in those things, and hope could circumvent itself into other things like charity, like love, like faith, right? So thank you both for answering that question only the way that Jack Ridl and David S. Cho can answer that question. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. If you want, everyone that is here can get off mute. I'll take off the spotlight so we can see everyone in grid status. You can come, you can say goodnight. You could say any of your well wishes to our authors, say hello. Let's just hear you clap and everything. Just come on. Come in and share.
Thank you both. Thank you so much for a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Have a good night.